Small doses. Self-help from the hip. Small doses. We're talking that shit. Small doses. And keeping it real. Small doses. With me and Nana Seals. It's so funky.
This is the perfect beginning to this episode of Small Doses. Side effects of being a Black intellectual, which is not the same as side effects of being just an intellectual. Because I be feeling like we got a whole other thing going on.
We do. Can I talk? Am I talking? Am I on?
You're talking. You're
I don't
here.
know how technology works.
So we have Marc Lamont Hill joining us. He's, I think the best way to describe you is a smart-ass brother. Yeah, I feel like that encompasses.
I'll take that.
Amongst that, Marc is a business owner. He owns a number of entrepreneurial ventures, including Uncle Bobby's, which is a bookstore and coffee shop in Philadelphia, PA. Marc is also a professor, a tenured professor, might I add, at Temple University. He's also a Morehouse man, and I believe are you a Kappa?
Wow. We've been friends all these years. Yes.
You are a Kappa, because some things I like to forget.
The pettiness, yes.
No shade. So yes, Marc is a Kappa, and Marc is somebody who has contributed consistently and willfully to not only the African American cultural canon and the conversation around Black excellence, Black empowerment, Black entertainment on Black entertainment television.
Thanks.
But also topics extending as far as, Black Palestinians. And you are also very involved in the conversation around revolution and prison industrial complex, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I say all this to say that he is the right person to have in this conversation on side effects of being a Black intellectual, not just because he is smart and knows how to put up solid memes, but also because he has contributed to the leveling up of intellectualism within the intellectual space and outside of it. Because if you're only talking to other intellects,
what's the point?
On top of that, he's my motherfucking friend. Ooh, he's my motherfucking friend. Ooh, ooh.
You are by far the most ridiculous person I know. And it's my favorite thing about you.
I'll take it.
It's a compliment.
I would like to counter by saying you are by far also the most ridiculous person I know, and thus the impetus for our friendship.
Indeed.
I often say to Marc, do you think Malcolm and Maya were like this? Because as intellectual as we are, I think what people fail to realize is that there's like a gradient of ways in which that intellectualism presents itself. So I would love to hear from you first, just on like, well, you know what, in particular, the fact that you were the one who decided that this was the right topic. And I would love to hear why you feel like this is the right topic for us in particular.
Yeah, because, your podcast deals with this question of side effects.
He has never listened to my podcast. Let's be clear.
I have heard snippets. And in those snippets, the idea of side effects is important. Like, think about unintended consequences and unintended expectations, unintended burdens. And I think when we talk about Black intellectuals, we don't think about that. We think about really smart Black people that do really smart stuff in really smart places.
All the time.
All the time.
Infallibly.
Right. And it's like, I think that that's important to talk about. You know, I come out of an intellectual tradition. I was mentored either face-to-face and in person with folk or through their work. I was mentored by so many people, you know, whether it's Arthur Schomburg, whether it's John Henry Clark, whether it's Zora Neale Hurston, whether it's Bell Hooks, whether it's Angela Davis, whether it's Cornel West, whether it's Michael Eric Dyson, whomever, you know, Malefi Asante. We go across, you know, Marimba Ani. There's so many people.
You gonna name drop? Just let me know if this is gonna be the Game's first album.
Just
and
Game's
you're
every
gonna
album.
Just name drop. Touche for the duration.
Nope, just them. I'm good. You know, but I think about it because
like I was mentored by like Heavy D and the Boys by.
But you know what's funny? It's just like rap, right? Because if I just had said 3 names, then people would be like, "Oh, this nigga just said W.E.B. Du Bois. He ain't thinking about the Africans, so I gotta say Malefi Asante." And then I said, "Well, if I say Malefi Asante, I gotta say women, so I gotta say Marimba Ani." And I gotta look at the modern. And you didn't say the feminist, so I said Bell Hook. And it's like I really did develop from those people, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking I gotta say all this stuff because there's a politics. So just like with hip hop, right? If you say one thing, you don't say another, everybody takes it as a diss, right?
Well, just like the internets. Like if you love strawberries, they're like, and what about oranges though?
Exactly.
So you don't fuck with citrus?
Right. You used to fuck with citrus, but then you sold out. You know what I mean? And then it becomes this whole conversation. It becomes this whole thing, right? Now you Illuminati, right? Because they be eating oranges at the meeting. And it becomes this whole conversation about this something other than the thing you want to talk about, which is the shit you like. And as a Black intellectual, I come out of a tradition that says we got to take in all this information and use it. But I think intellectual work should be combined with joy and pleasure. And sometimes we forget that part. And it's not the whole story of who and what we are. So you end up as a Black intellectual being pushed into this very narrow space and people don't respect your entire personhood. And they can't imagine you in ways or forms outside of the classroom or outside of like the typewriter or whatever.
It's like seeing your teacher, like 4th grade teacher at the grocery store.
Exactly.
Like, what? You don't, so you mean you don't live in our classroom?
Exactly. Remember an episode of Cosby Show when Theo teacher came over and she took her hair and she had her hair down and she it's like fuck this whole world up. He was like, what the fuck is this?
I'm mad that I can't remember her name right now.
Oh, I can't either.
Because it was like that name was repeated a lot because he really didn't want to take her class.
No. And he saw her as this mean, evil woman. Then she came in the crib looking totally different. And her personality was different. She was nice. She was charming. She was all these things. Similarly, if you're academic, people expect you to be very serious all the time. Very
stoic.
Stern. Yeah, stoic. Very stoic. And it's like I'm quiet when I'm not in public sometimes. If I'm not talking like people I trust and care about. But that's not academic shit. That's just who I am. But I'm silly as hell all the time. I'm actually on my best behavior right now. For you know, but in real life, like that's not the whole story of me. And so
moist. This 12-year-old, like,
why are you like this?
Because, to be honest, I consider myself a Black intellectual, and I've proudly inherited that journey from those, like you said, who have mentored us before, right? And I proudly take that on and consider it to be something I need to uphold, and I don't take it lightly. I am responsible as I can be, and still it's like that ends up getting turned on its side, and it almost typecasts you. Like it makes it to where you feel like if you're I don't know, if you're yourself in any other way, that people either one feel like you're being fake,
right?
Because how dare you have like other energies, and then they also just don't want to accept like these other elements about you without feeling like it's conflicting with the intellectualism.
Right.
And so for me, like even, I remember I saw this video on YouTube. I showed you this video where this dude is like, she need to figure out what she want to be. Either she going to be a comedian or she going to be smart or she going to be an actress. Like pick and choose. And it was interesting because, well, first of all, when we see white people do that with us, we are livid. You know, like when they say things like, well, like Katie Couric saying to Denzel Washington, you know, should Hollywood people not involve themselves in politics? Or, you know, LeBron, stick to dribbling, you know, these things. But I feel like with Black intellectuals, there's this idea that if you are moving in this space, there's almost like an austerity that you're supposed to project in order to be taken seriously. And I personally feel like you can be a Black intellectual coming from a number of different angles. I think Killer Mike is a great example of that. Like, he's a full-on rapper. He has certain levels of ignorance, as we all do. I mean, I know all the words to Slob on My Knob.
I'm not familiar with that. I have respect for... No, that's my shit. And it's like you should be able to know that and do these other things. And I think the best intellectuals have always done those things, right? They've never been singular. And there was a time where you couldn't be. It's just like if you watch like old TV shows from the 70s, whenever they had an episode, like on Good Times, when they had a rent party, or toward the last season, they did a similar thing where they were raising money. And all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, Bookman can do impersonations? Wait, that was a dancer? Oh wait, like Walona sings the theme song to the Jeffersons? Oh wait a minute, it's fucking Janet Jackson, right? You had to be able to do 10 things because that's the only way you could get into the business. You weren't singularly talented, and you may shine in this one place, but when you get an opportunity, then you're gonna shine in this other place. And that's part of, I think, the genius of this stuff. I mean, Du Bois is, I use W.E.B. Du Bois as just one example, but Lorraine Hansberry is another one, right? Also a person who was in conversation with Du Bois. You know, Du Bois was interested in music. He was interested in theater. He was interested in philosophy. He was interested in history. He didn't just want to write, you know, these heavy tomes. He also wanted to write to everyday people. And, you know, Lorraine Hansberry, we obviously see her genius writing, you know, in terms of being a playwright. Look at James Baldwin, right? Yeah. He's writing Giovanni's Room. He's writing, you know,
Go Tell It on the Mountain.
Go Tell It on the Mountain. And Bill Street talking. Then he has the ability to make, you know, some of the most important essays we've ever seen, like The Fire Next Time, right? Both chapters of that book. So, like, you got these, exactly, right? I mean, that's the shit I'm talking about. And the fact that you can do all those things, to me, is a sign of your talent, but it also shapes your intellectual work. Like, I'm more intellectual when I'm listening to music. I'm more intellectual when I watch a funny TV show. You know what I mean? I'm more intellectual when I was just watching Community a minute ago before I was talking to you. And like, I'm like,
is this your first time watching?
Yeah, I'm on season 1 for the first time. And I'm like, oh, they get real meta. Like, with the shit they're laughing at but that helps me think about my own work differently.
Yeah.
Poetry helps me, Sonia Sanchez helps me think about my work differently. So like, part of it just being intellectual, not being one lane, to me is the genius of it. But also, like, it's not inauthentic, right? The fact that you got Baldwin on your shelf, you know, you might have 3 other books on the shelf that ain't got nothing to do with Baldwin, right? And you may also have some, if it were the DVD era, you'd have 3 movies on your shelf that might be some wild shit. That's a whole other podcast we got to talk about, because you got this whole nerd thing that I just can't get with. I don't understand you Harry Potter people. You will call me like once a week and be like, yo, I just got like, so, it reminds me of this episode in Star Trek when and your whole voice changes and shit. I have no idea what you're talking about. You know, and I'm like, who are you? A minute ago you was doing trap music. Now you're talking about some sci-fi.
The Borg.
Stuff. Right. I don't even get the reference. That's what I mean. Like, so there's, again, maybe I put the same limitations on, I'm so embarrassed for you right now. I put the same limitations on you that other people put on me. But I'm like, there's just certain things we shouldn't be doing. What is that? That looks like Hey Arnold, but like it looks like it looked like some Hey Arnold like Mammy version. Like I couldn't figure out.
And just to take you to a whole other place of annoyance, Goku-san.
You have pet cats, which is cool. And when you told me the cats' names, I didn't get the references. And you were like, "This is Lando." I'm like,
for Orlando?
That's what I thought it was.
Yeah, no.
The look of rage on your face. I think you'd have rather I stole some money from you or something.
Well, because Lando Calrissian was the black man of the Star Wars universe. And I just feel like as a black intellectual, at the very least, you should know the blacks in these predominantly white spaces. Like they were in PWIs before we even applied that to educational institutions. Starfleet, it doesn't get more PWI. Like they had to really, their whole level of diversity was like, we got to get aliens. Like, and yet still it's predominantly white. They have a whole galaxy that they can go to, and it's still predominantly white. We got a Klingon here and a Bajoran here, but really, it's still predominantly white.
Can you? I can't wait till you watch this back and you hear yourself. You probably got a whole like crew of like nerds who will appreciate what you just said, but I literally have no idea what the fuck you just said. And I say that proudly.
Well, I will say this. I think that what you're saying, though, is in being a black intellectual, though, like there are these things that are outside of our just like black scope that inform our black scope. And I think it's always like fascinating to people to find out that like you'd be interested as earnestly as you are in black excellence, in black academia, in black literature, in something that has nothing to do with blackness. You know what I mean? Like
very, very true.
You are a polylinguist.
Oh, okay, I know where that was going. Like,
I definitely had to shut down the conversation that was about to happen on my Instagram the other day. Someone had liked a post about polygyny and let's start this marriage of 5 women and me. And I just I said to them, I said, I y'all niggas be really fantasizing about this shit. And a lot of the ones who are fantasizing about it, your own life by yourself ain't even together, but you want 5 women.
5 of them, right.
To sign up. Y'all come sign up now.
The only thing dudes are talking about when they say that is sex. They're not signing up for 5 sets of bills. They're not signing up for 5 conversations to start with. And you know what really bothers me though? Like nobody wants to hear that, 5 times. Nobody wants to have to explain where they at to 5 people.
No.
None of that.
They're not signing up for 5 different birth control methods. Like, none of that. 5 different dietary needs. 5 different sets of parents. So, 5 different in-laws. Like, they're... And for what it's worth, let's just keep it a buck. At a certain age, there's a good chance there's going to be 5 different baby daddies.
Exactly.
Because... women have had children with other people at a certain point in their life. But that's but see how we get intellectual about it.
Exactly.
And that's the thing.
That's what we do.
But you were about to say something that was probably poignant.
I don't even remember. But the idea, I think, of oh shit, it was important. You said something on your page. Hold up. I can't remember, but either way. I know what it is. Yeah, the idea for me of having interests that are outside of blackness is important, that inform our blackness and inform sort of how we talk and think about what we do. I think that is so important. Like, I love listening to music that's not black sometimes. I love watching TV shows that are black. I mean, I'll watch The Golden Girls and find that to be some of the, or Lucille Ball. You know what I mean? I love Lucy shows. I mean, like, there's genius in that shit. And you just have to appreciate that. We just talking about watching Community or The Office or 30 Rock, those types of TV shows excite me. I don't like them more than black stuff, but I like that stuff too. And part of me being a black intellectual isn't having such a narrow, parochial idea of blackness that I can't bring nothing else into the conversation. Because at the core, I know that black people started all of it. That black people are the inspiration for so much of what we see. I don't feel anxious, subconscious about consuming stuff that's not Black in that moment. So yeah, no, I like having other interests, but also having non-academic interests. You know, you said something that really stuck with me earlier in this podcast when you said this idea of people feeling like you're fake if you show up different ways in different places. And for me, that's not, one, it's not true, but two, it's also interesting that the assumption is that the academic one is the most authentic you, right? That if you go to trap karaoke, for example, that whatever you did there is you being fake, but you know, being on a talk show is the real you. I'm much more, if there's a fundamental essential Marc, it's much more going to show up at the nigga shit than it is going to show up on cable news.
And I think that there's something to be said for like the brainwashing of white America, how that influences that thought process, right? Because it's this idea that says that if you are learned, that somehow you have like stepped outside of the us of us. And so that when you come back into the us of us, it's like, oh, you know, you've somehow, I think sometimes people feel like, well, that you're just trying to be down now because you somehow left this. And I think that's where, you know, I look at this idea of fake woke.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's this concept of fake woke. It gets thrown around very willy-nilly. But it really ends up being rooted in this concept of like, if I don't agree with what this person has said, they're no longer an intellect. They're no longer woke. They're no longer a supporter of Black excellence. And I think there's a wide range of the difference between disagreeing with what someone has said and disagreeing with the value of that on Black excellence in empowering Black folks.
Yeah. I think there's a wariness. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think there's a wariness of among Black people of Black intellectuals who are in the academy. I'm not saying Black people aren't intellectual or that they're not, or that they're anti-intellectual. I'm just saying that there's a wariness and a skepticism of people whose job it is to be intellectuals for good reason. A lot of us have sold out the people. A lot of us have not, you know, done anything but fill our pockets. A lot of us are frauds. You know what I mean? A lot of us. Enough. I mean, yes. Yeah. I think the biggest, a lot. And I think the biggest issue is that most just don't pay attention to the community. I don't think most are actively trying to do harm to the community. They're just indifferent. But the fact is they've gotten.
What do you think that they're doing? Is it more that they just like hearing themselves talk?
Some like hearing themselves talk. Some like being translators for white people, right? And there's a lot more money in telling, you know, as Adolf Reed's one says, there's much more interest in telling white people what the drums are saying, you know, being their translator than it is in actually serving the people. And so if I'm a Black person in the hood and I see some dude in the academy stop through every once in a while and talk about Black people or talk about Black suffering or Black misery or Black joy for that matter, even though there's no money in talking about Black joy, then I'm already worried about this dude. I'm skeptical. So I say that to say that sometimes I do understand why somebody might be quick to dismiss a Black intellectual when they step off course or when they say something that's crazy, because it's like, we ain't really trust you. And then we kind of let you in to see if you be all right, and you was doing all right. But now, you know, as soon as something's up for grabs, something's at stake, you sell us out so quickly and so easily. And that's the problem, is that so much of Black leadership, it's not just they sell out, which is the fundamental problem, it's they sell out so cheap. They will sell out the whole community for a
Benz.
If you lucky.
You was about to say a Ford Fiesta, like.
That's what I'm saying, yo. Like, they don't care. They just want, and so I get it. But then what that leads to is what you were getting at, which is this kind of this part of cancel culture and this kind of disposability of people every time you disagree. So, like, yes, I'll give you a perfect example. Yesterday, I did a thing for the NAACP with Charlemagne and T.I. and Benjamin Crump and Van Lathan. And we're on there building and talking, and the conversation was supposed to be about sort of a new normal for Black men after Corona, right? Yes. And so, and somebody comes on and says, I hear all y'all saying, but y'all ain't said nothing about reparations. Y'all ain't said nothing about a policy platform. All y'all doing is patting each other on the back. And my point was, this whole session was about new ideas of masculinity, new ideas of healthiness. Doesn't mean we don't believe in reparations. Doesn't mean we don't believe in policy. It just wasn't what this conversation was. But then the next day on Twitter, people are saying, oh, they're rejecting reparations. Oh, they're rejecting a Black agenda. All they want to do is talk about love and that intersectional feminist stuff. And it's like, no, we can do two things at once.
Yeah.
But they're so scared that we're going to sell Black people out. And everybody gets this battery in their back to throw everybody away, that they can't hear that maybe we do love Black people. Maybe we do support a policy agenda. Maybe we do support Black reparations and Black freedom. And we want to have a conversation about loving each other. That's okay too.
Well, you know, it's interesting because you said something where, just now where you said there's no money in Black joy.
Never.
It's fascinating to hear you say that, because I feel like that's literally what I've attempted to build my whole platform on.